You've been listening to the Edie-raether-radio-show on Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network. Better thinking leads to better decisions, and better decisions create better performance. That is the foundation of Edie-raether's groundbreaking Neuroshift's trademark approach. As a behavioral strategist, best-selling author, and expert in the neuroscience of success, Edie helps people interrupt automatic thinking, replace unproductive patterns, and become the boss of their brain. Her newest book, The 3-Second Neuroshift, reveals how a small shift in thought can create meaningful changes in leadership, performance, resilience, relationships, and life. Discover Edie's books, programs, and speaking resources at Edie-raether.com. That's EDIERAETHER.com. You can also find the Edie-raether Radio Show on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other major podcast platforms. Now, back to the Edie-raether Radio Show. Take it away, Peter.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingils here. Yes, you are listening to the Edie-raether Radio Show on the Building Fortunes Radio Network. We put this on buildingfortunesradio.com. Of course, we put this on the .net version. We're also on Humongous. It's really big. Humongous Radio AM, and the FM stations. And then, of course, this is information worth sharing, so we put it on Amazon's podcast, YouTube's podcasts. We put it on Apple's podcast. We put it all over the place. It's on Facebook and also on things like Spotify and name-dropping things like iHeartRadio. So if it looks like Edie-raether is everywhere, it's because she is. She's got a great story and interesting message. I've worked with her for a number of months now, but I knew her for a number of years as a result of some speed networking that I met her on, and I always found her very fascinating, very knowledgeable, super deep when it comes to her level of knowledge and intellect and philosophy, and she's been sharing some radio shows here on the Edie-raether Radio Show promoting a book. She's got a great book. She's got several great books, but this newest one, The 3-Second Neuroshift, really hits home for a lot of people, especially right now, where there's things that might get us either on or off track. So the 3-Second Neuroshift is really a great book. She's got a workbook with that as well. If you go to Edie-raether.com and you look for the books, you'll be able to see it right there. And we even put together a bundle. So if you really like this and you want to share it with other people, either for gifts or promotional purposes for your own employees or salespeople, if you're a sales manager, you want to give this to people so they can make that 3-Second Neuroshift when it counts in their life and in their business and in their sales negotiations. They'll be able to do that as well. You'll find bundles there, either the book by themselves, the book by the workbook. You'll see it on Edie-raether.com. So, Edie, thanks for being here on your own radio show.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Peter.
So we've had great conversations, and a little bit about the backstory. You've been doing this for a really long time, and you're super successful. You've been on stages all over the world. And now you're doing our radio shows with the purpose of introducing the 3-Second Neuroshift book. So you got to buy the book. You can listen to as many of these radio shows as you want, but then you got to buy the book and the workbook as well, and then apply those principles. We've been speaking about belief systems, and we started last week talking about belief systems. If you missed it and you want to go back to any of the other ones, you go to Edie-raether-radio-show.com, or I'm sorry, Edie-raether.com. There's a button called Radio Shows. You'll be able to pick it up over there. But let's continue that wonderful conversation about belief systems, one of my favorite topics. So go ahead. Let's carry on.
Yeah, and Peter, it's probably my favorite too because it's the core of everything. And I mentioned to you before we started, I think in one of the previous shows I probably mentioned I lost my son on the 4th of July. He thought he was jumping into his playground and it was a death trap. And I want to talk a little bit because this does relate to beliefs, certainly. And a lot of people, I added this to the eulogy. It isn't easy for a mother to give the eulogy for her son, I'll tell you that. But I did it a couple times. And actually, things went on for hours. I think, he was pretty lovable. But the bottom line is he was on the Snake River. And what I added this time was a psychological perspective that I didn't think of the first time around in Wisconsin. And that is that, our beliefs are based on our experiences. we are water people. I grew up on Lake Michigan. He grew up on the bay. And what really is happening is that all of the best memories he had, if you ask him about the best family memories, they're going to be on the water. So his perception of reality, we have to realize that, our perceptions of reality can be very deceptive at times. And so his perception was that it was safe. It was his friend. It wasn't his foe. And therefore, when he jumped, he was jumping into his playground. In his mind, it was a celebration of life. His last jump was a jump for joy, and it ended up being a death trap. And I wanted to share that. First of all, people said you really should share that because it may save lives, your own child. In fact, his friends were out looking for his body, and a man came with 2 young children. They were going to jump off. And Brad said, you may want to think about this another time or another moment because I just lost my friend. And so it does fit into everything we're talking about with the 3-second neuroshift, that if we pause and we pivot, we can change our decisions. So I want you to be aware that, if we associate something positive with something we might do in the future, we may not see it as high risk because in the past we had so many positive associations with it. So now, moving into the 3-second neuroshift, had Tori paused, pivoted, reset, rewired, and thought twice, there's another level of thinking that comes into place. We shift from the instinctual brain, the emotional brain, and go into the neocortex, the CEO part of the brain that makes, positive decisions and is more logical and based on facts, not just, what we have experienced or what what feels like fun. And so the whole model, and you can get this, I think, Peter, we put it on the website. If not, we will. And it's the model that shows, if you look at it, you should just paste it by your desk, by your computer, and have it be a constant reminder, because this changes everything. That decision, one decision my son made, one micro moment, changed everything. Everything for his wife, his kids, for his mother, his colleagues. And so we have to understand that micro moment can change the trajectory of our lives, positive or negative. And that's why I feel so strongly about what I have written. So the model, and we'll make sure you get it, is that we have to first pause. We have to stop the automatic reaction, not for an hour, not for a week, but sometimes 3 seconds is enough to create the space. And Peter, I think in the book there are 8 pages of different research projects throughout the world, and it's all 3 seconds. I intuitively came upon 3 seconds, but the research is limitless in terms of proving that in 1.5 to 3 seconds. So whether we take a deep breath, we wear a rubber band and snap it to create that pause, whether we, take a sip, the water that we drink could be a trigger that we pause and we give our mind to shift. It's almost like a stick shift in a car, where we go from the instinctual brain, which is reactionary and not usually healthy. If somebody yells fire, we don't think twice. We just kind of dive in. In fact, using the diving incident, I could have lost a granddaughter and a grandson as well, because when we instinctually try to save someone else, everybody else can. There was just an incident in Ohio where one person was drowning, and it ended up being 5 because we're reactionary. We want to pause. We want to stop the automatic reaction, and that can be done in 3 seconds. And then we pivot. We ask simple questions. Remember, questions shape our destiny. Ask a question like, what else could be true? What would I choose if I weren't operating from an old belief system. And I think if any of you had listened last week, the old belief system is things like I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. Your parents, may have been angry and said things that instilled a script, a story, a message into your subconscious. And the subconscious is 95% of what we think, do, behave. And so we don't want to be operating from these old scripts, but more from a place of conscious choice. So we pause, number one. Number two, we pivot. Number three, we reset. We release the automatic emotional response. There's a chapter in the book on trauma release. There's 15 chapters, but one is on trauma release. And that is where we take a breath and we change our physiology. I mean, I remember my mom being a school teacher and people had to sit up straight. Now we're happy if kids don't bring guns or knives to school. Back then you got expelled if you chewed gum or if you didn't sit up straight. But see, we breathe better. We give more oxygen to the brain. So I see teenagers a lot slouching. Not only are they going to be, bent over before they're 70, but the fact is they're not giving oxygen to their brain. And it's like if you don't put gas in your car, it ain't going to run. And so it's the same thing here. We change our physiology as well and change your focus. So you change the language, not to, I'm just a failure, to what can I do better? So everything has to be reframed. That is what we then call the fourth stage, which is rewiring, where we replace the old mental pathway with a more useful one that will serve you well. So we might say something like, if you don't want to say I am perfect, instead you might say I am capable of learning. And instead of saying I never procrastinate, you might say I can take the next step, because it's all a process. And when we start rewiring, we start creating new neural pathways in the brain, and I mentioned this last week. As we reinforce the new neural pathways with new thoughts, new words, new language, the old ones just kind of fade. You're not feeding them energy. It's like not giving gas to a car. It'll stop. And that's how we can interrupt. I speak a lot at addiction conferences as well. And that, this stuff is perfect for, I don't care what addiction. And it's not just alcohol, drugs, opioids. It's not just that. I look at anxiety. In most cases, anxiety is an addiction because it's what we've always done. We may have had a mother that said, oh, my God, don't catch a cold, don't touch the doorknob. I think with COVID, we're going to have a whole generation of people that are very anxious and almost neurotic or OCD because they grew up at an impressionable time during COVID where it's don't touch this, don't shake hands, don't open the door. And if we learn that, the world becomes a very scary place, and we develop this internal fear that, doesn't allow us to take the risk necessary to succeed. So that is why we have to kind of rewire, put in new thoughts, energy, phrases. So a key phrase might be, you don't have to change your whole life today. All you have to do is change the next 3 seconds. That's not overwhelm. That's not overload. You just have to change your next thought. So I want to go then into the 3-second test. Before I do that, Peter, do you have any comments or any questions?
No comments, no questions. Of course, I love the stuff that you're talking about, and I appreciate that you blended into real-life situations like the things that happen with your son and the subsequent actions. And there's a lot of people that have questions about what does she mean by the 3-second neuroshift? Like change your mind in 3 seconds. What does that mean? Or change the direction, or don't do something in those 3 seconds. And I know you're kind of covering that as we go along.
Yeah, and what I just said, it only takes 3 seconds, literally, to pause, to pivot, to rewire, to reset, and then remember to repeat. There have been a lot of studies done, but around 66 days. A lot of my colleagues, John Azaraf and so forth, everybody kind of settles on 66 days. But you know what? It's an individual thing, because I see a lot of people, it's easier to judge how instantly something can work with smoking as opposed to losing weight, because if you want to lose 60 pounds, you're not going to lose it in 3 seconds. But when I hypnotize people, about 85%, they're just free of the addiction after one session. And it's like one and done. That seems impossible. But once you interject and you interrupt, the old thought patterns. Now, you have to be aware. Let's just take smoking for an example, or any drug. It can be any dependency, any habit that is not serving you well, any addiction, is that, I do record the sessions so that people can then have the advantage of the repetition. So they may immediately quit. The reason I want the repetition is because here's the trick. Here's the scoop, Peter, that if somebody dies, or there's a stressful moment, or you lose your job, or your husband or wife says, I'm done, closes the door, and suddenly you're dealing with a divorce that you didn't even see coming. In those stressful moments, any old habit that gave you dopamine, I think we talked about dopamine in a previous session.
Oh, sure we did.
They're like gremlins, and they're like just trolls that are just sitting under a bridge waiting for you to have a weak moment. And that's why with alcoholics, for example, AA, there are a few people that I think can just slowly, just have one. But the majority of people, once you have one, maybe one, two, what happens is you start shifting from the neocortex, from the CEO brain, we'll call it. You start going into the emotional brain. So if somebody's drinking, for example, the emotional brain, two things happen. Some people get really sugary sweet and obnoxiously loving and are hugging you, and you don't want to even be near them. Or some people ready to fight in the parking lot. And so we then trigger what emotions might have been lying in our subconscious. Then, if we have a few more drinks, we go into the instinctual brain, which is totally reactionary, where we have lost control. That's when we think we can drive a car and we can do it safely, only to maybe kill, as I've got in my book, 3 young girls at a Kermit. And so you always want to have the most desired thing in the world, and we might do a session on that. I'm certified in something that really focuses on the one thing people want is control. Because we always talk about people resist change. No, they resist being changed. If I am choosing to change, I have control. So it all comes down to having control. And this is important for people to know when they're parenting, that you want the child to feel, you kind of set up the next play, so to speak, so the child feels that they are choosing it. Now, it might be, I remember with my kids, I didn't want them to get teased because they would make stupid choices, but I wanted them to choose their clothes. So I might put out 3 shirts, 3 pairs of pants, and they get to choose, but all of them, would work out okay. So that's what you do as a parent. You set up situations where you're giving the child a sense of choice. That's how they build self-esteem, where they can start trusting their choice. If your child doesn't want to wear a coat or something, and you're saying, but it's cold, they're learning that they can't trust their own intuition, instincts about things. So, it's just a matter of knowing how to handle it. And there is a chapter on parenting as well, by the way. So I'm going to go now into the 3-second test. And it's good to kind of make this interactive in your own mind. I'm going to give you 3 statements, and notice what happens inside you. Just feel your own gut feeling as I say these statements. I can't. How do you feel? I can't. Actually,
not better.
Peter, those were those were Tori's last words. His wife said, swim to the raft. And he yelled, I can't. And that is that moment of total powerlessness and helplessness. And in his situation, I'm beginning to believe it was the current that took him away. He really could not. How many times do you say, I can't, when it's total BS? You know what I mean? You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't make money. You can't. And if you say that, you immediately put in your mind an iron wall that is impossible to walk through or to permeate. If you honestly believe you can. And that's why I use the example of, most people know lakefront property is not cheap, especially if it's near a big city, and I am near Charlotte. I wanted this property. I didn't have a dang dime. I had lost it all to crooks because I trusted people that said things I wanted to hear. My bad. Without a dime. So I have guests, because I have vacation rentals here, Peter. They always say, I would do anything to have a property like this. And I'll say, do you have $10 in your bank account? Well, of course I do. Well, you have more than I have. Because of a belief system. So as soon as you say, I can't do this, I can't get a job, you already created a scenario in your subconscious that'll make it pretty difficult to get one. And this is the other thing, Peter, is that once you say, I can't, and you say it often enough, you will believe it. And once you believe it, here is the scary part. It creates an identity that makes it totally impossible. Because what we do, if I say, I've never smoked, but if I say I can't quit smoking, that belief becomes my identity. I'm a smoker. What do smokers do? They smoke. And so once it's part of your identity, listen to this. Once it's part of your identity, you know what we do? We defend it. Once we have the belief, it gets solidified into an identity. And then to change becomes so impossible because we defend it and we say, I can't quit. Or we say, well, we got to die of something anyhow. Yeah, that's true, but my mother was almost 100, died in her sleep. That's a better way to go than to live with oxygen tanks the last 20 years. You know what I mean? And so that's when it really gets scary. When we start defending it and we say things, yeah, we're all going to die. But you want to increase your risk of it? Okay, it's a choice. But see, that's part of the denial that we get into. And because we defend it. Because we don't want to resist. We don't want to change. We resist it. So that's the feeling, I can't. It's a block. Now, I'm going to give you another statement. I can't yet. Just adding the word yet changes your mind. It opens your mind to being what I call a possibility thinker. I have something in my room here, and it's possibility blooms with each day. Every day you wake up, it's a new possibility if you choose to look at it as a process. I just haven't yet, because that sets your brain up to believe it's possible. It's just taking a few more steps. Statement number 3. What's my next step? Now, here's the question. Did you feel a difference of what's my next step? Now, Peter, we're giving ourselves permission to take action. You start seeing how the process, the pathway in the woods is now open. It's easy to walk through it. So the first statement, I can't, that closes the door. It's self-sabotage. The second one leaves the door open. And the third one makes you look for the handle. And if you look for the handle because you believe it's there, you'll find it. So basically, your brain loves a question. Give it a problem, and it'll look for evidence. Give it a possibility, and it will start looking for pathways. I'm going to repeat that. I really like that, actually. Give your brain a problem, and it'll look for evidence. Give it a possibility, and it will start looking for pathways. I think the situation with losing all my money and yet having one of the best spots on a 500-mile lake, I refuse to say I can't do this. I had no idea, Peter, how the heck, with no money, I was going to keep this property. But, the old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, I've never heard of somebody buying a property of this, amount on credit cards. I've never heard of it. You haven't either, I'm sure. Nobody does it.
No. Nope.
But that's what I mean. When you are a possibility thinker and you refuse to quit, as Winston Churchill said, never, ever, ever quit. The brain is phenomenal in terms of its creativity. What does that say? When the teacher is ready, the student appears. Everything, the universe opens to you. God, the universe, both, whatever you're comfortable with. So now we go from I am someone who, and then I want you to complete that sentence. I'm someone who. I am becoming someone who, and then you might have a subtle but powerful answer to that. You say, I am not confident, as opposed to now saying, I am becoming more confident. If you keep saying, I'm terrible with money, you will be. But if you say, I am learning to manage money differently, you might say, I don't take risks, and instead say, you know what, I'm becoming someone who can really tolerate uncertainty. This is good for people who have too much anxiety because they're just so risk averse. And when you're so risk averse, you don't take any steps or action. You're immobilized. You're frozen in time. And, you're basically existing because growth only happens with taking steps. And like a 1-year-old learning how to walk, you've got to take that first step. And too many of you might be still holding on to the coffee table saying, God didn't mean for me to walk. And that is simply not true. So it's always that you are in the process of becoming. So this is kind of a good time to just, talk about what are stories in your life that you need to reinvent. Age can describe a number. It doesn't have to describe your identity. I'm in my 83rd year of life. I just bought new skis and what did I buy? Skis and boots. Just without water skiing yesterday. And I know most people in their 80s don't live like I do, but it's not denial. I think like a 23-year-old, and I can probably beat most of them on my bike. Wow. And so this is such a perfect example that it really comes down to a choice. In fact, I'm doing some programs. If anybody's in Wisconsin, I'll be back there mid-October, and I just created a new talk, Peter, and I love it. It's going to be for senior centers, but I'm doing one for wellness centers as well. But I love this one. What is it again? Never grow up. It's a trap. And,
wow.
Isn't that a great title? I love it.
That is.
Yeah.
That is. We got to take a commercial break. I want you to stay with that statement, though. I want to come back to that, so we're going to be right back real quick. Here we go.
Okay.
You've been listening to the Edie-raether-radio show on Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network. Better thinking leads to better decisions, and better decisions create better performance. That is the foundation of Edie-raether's groundbreaking Neuroshift's trademark approach. As a behavioral strategist, best-selling author, and expert in the neuroscience of success, Edie helps people interrupt automatic thinking, replace unproductive patterns, and become the boss of their brain. Her newest book, The 3-Second Neuroshift, reveals how a small shift in thought can create meaningful changes in leadership, performance, resilience, relationships, and life. Discover Edie's books, programs, and speaking resources at Edie-raether.com. That's EDIE-RAETHER.com. You can also find the Edie-raether Radio Show on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other major podcast platforms. Now back to the Edie-raether Radio Show. Take it away, Peter.
And we are back. Make sure you check it out. Go to Edie-raether.com. A lot of this information is there. And the books, of course, she's got great books. If you go to the books, you'll be able to find the 3-second Neuroshift book. It's available as a book. There's a workbook that comes with it as well. It's also available in bundles of 10 so far. If you need more, you can always call me or call Edie or contact us, and we'll be able to figure out whatever works for you. And, of course, she's a speaker. So if you're booking speakers, make sure you book Edie-raether. She comes in and does a great job, as you will see. She's done lots of speeches already, and she should be speaking for you or your organization. So, Edie, go back to this new speaking engagement you have with the seniors. I think this is so fun and so cool.
Yeah. And I kind of am working on both ends. Like all the proceeds from the book, The 3-Second Neuroshift, go to my children's nonprofit, which is wingsforwishesacademy.org. So if you're, a group that is funding nonprofits, this is where everything I'm saying is to prevent it in the next generation. Because the reason I did the children's program, I Believe I Can Fly, Peter, is because as a psychotherapist, I'm undoing and redoing. It's often dealing with messed up minds, and then I got to fix them and repair them. Prevention just makes more sense. What if we wire kids right at the right time? And even if their parents are giving them negative messages, this can be an antidote. So that's where I start with prevention. And then, I think with working with the topic, Never Grow Up, It's a Trap, because of my age. I mean, if a 23-year-old were giving that talk, the senior citizens are rolling their eyes like, what does little Tilly know about this? So I think, I'm realizing at this time in my life, I can serve as an inspiration, as an example that, yes, you can do it. You don't have to sit and contemplate your navel because you're in your 80s or 90s. I should just say, I know my mother started a modeling career. I don't know if she was in her 80s or 90s, but it was in one of those like hospital reclining beds. And I remember she said she was making more money, in her bed or lying on her back. And I said, be careful how you word that. Then she was back when she was making 10 cents an hour because she did live to be almost 100. But those events are also fundraising events that I'm doing. But, it's, when we say age is just a number, I'm not being ridiculous. I do have a healthcare background, and there are people that unfortunately come into this world, with genes that may not serve them as well as others. But for the most part, Peter, it is a choice. I mean, I do go swimming just about every day, at least, from May to October. And then I bike. So I make different choices. I think even in Tori, my other grandson from my other son had a hard time getting to shore. He works out 2 hours a day, and he was 30 years younger. So what I'm saying is that when we make a big decision, it's usually based on many little decisions. If Tori hadn't worked as hard, but had worked out all day. You know what I mean? So it's the little decisions that lead to the bigger decisions. It's every time you take a brownie. Everything, Peter, is cause and consequence. If you're going to choose a pan full of brownies, you're going to probably be larger than you want it to be. And, obesity is one of the leading causes of death in terms of the repercussions of almost, heart, knee replacement surgery, all of the repercussions of it. It's not just I have a weight problem. That weight problem is causing, an early death because all of the other things will follow. Does that make sense? That one little decision to eat too many brownies. I'm just using that, as an example. But if you're going to have leafy greens and fresh vegetables and fruits every day, and walk a couple miles, changes everything. So it's those micro moments, those little decisions. See, and once we make our habits make us. We are what we repeatedly do. So if we do it often enough, my other son is an exercise nut, and if he doesn't go to the gym, it's an addiction, but it's a good one. It's a good habit, just like somebody who can't get their cocaine. He's got to have his exercise. See, and it all goes back to what we said in a previous session. It's all what gives you dopamine. One of the things we were talking about with Tori, he was a giver. He was borrowing money from me at one time. He ended up doing extremely well. But we all have our ups and downs. It's like the stock market that he was the engine of. And he was borrowing money from me, and I noticed we were on some tour bus, where people are giving $1 tip. He gave a $50 tip when he was borrowing money from me to feed his kids. Why would somebody be that generous? Because that's how he gets his dopamine. It's kind of like Mother Teresa. It's not, it's not a painful thing to be giving. It's just, you just get your dose of dopamine. So I want everybody to realize whatever habits you have, whatever repeated behaviors you have, it's releasing dopamine, which is the internal engine, the internal driver and motivation of all our behaviors and all that we become. And I think I talked about that in a previous session. That external motivation, in a sense, is manipulation. It's trying to get your kids to do, and it's not necessarily bad. But once you have internal drive, which comes with reinforcement of good choices, because the dopamine is as far as I'm concerned, it's the only real addiction. So anyway, I just wanted to insert that. And do you have any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go on to...
No, we're good.
Okay. So this is going to be a little bit interactive today. I want to just do a belief audit. And I have to tell you, there's a lot of therapists that are giving my books out to their clients with the workbooks, and my handyman's already reading it for the second time. So it's not, there's a lot of meat and potatoes in it. So if I were asking you to complete the sentence, I am, these are questions I want you to ask yourself and create a new and healthier neural pathway that serves you well. People like me, in the past you might say, people like me always fail, always screw up. Now, change that. People like me keep trying no matter how many times they fall down. People like me don't eat healthy foods. If you say that statement, it's, again, the repetition of that statement is creating an identity, and you will be unhealthy. Or it's too late for me to change. Is it ever too late? Really? So what we have to do is just be more rational and, do these things make sense? People like me don't. What is that about? You're people like me. You're a person of one. It's your conscious choice that's going to direct your life. Or it's too late for me to. That's, older people will often say that. I have somebody that's 40 years old, and she said it's too late for me to, find the right career. I don't know. Grandma Moses would probably disagree with you. Or, this statement, I could never. Boy, what a barrier and what a block that is. So I want you to take sentences like that and give another option that is part of possibility thinking. And one of my favorite questions, I love it, is what would you be doing if you knew you couldn't fail? And people ask the question, but what if I fall? And I say, but what if you fly? So every moment is a moment of choice where you can shift your thinking. So Step number 1, here's a personal neuroshift. Step 1 is identify what belief. Right now, I want you, as you're listening to me, what belief is limiting you? Number 2, interrupt it. Ask questions like, is this really true? Because it could have been a teacher, a bully, could have been your own parent that embedded that thought in your mind. Whose story are you living? It's time for you to take control, to be in charge, master your destiny, your direction. Interrupt that. Is that really true? And then replace it. What belief would serve me better? What thought? What language? See, your language creates an image. And that speaks, bodies like visualization. They don't understand the abstract word. That's why little children don't read Webster's dictionary. They like picture stories books. So what image can you replace that with? And then number 4 is action. What is one tiny action you can take today that proves that new belief? Because a new identity isn't created by saying something once. It's just not enough. It's created by repeatedly giving your brain evidence. So, you're not finished yet. I want to bring it home emotionally. Maybe you've spent years believing you're too old, too late, too damaged, too inexperienced. Not enough. But what I want to leave you with is you are not your history. Your history is information. It's not a life sentence. You get to choose if you want to be a prisoner of that past programming or you want to free yourself and choose the destiny you desire. So you may not be able to control what happened in the past, but you know what? You can begin changing what happens next. And so your final neuroshift is right now think of one belief you want to change. Don't try to change your whole life. What is one belief? I want you to finish the sentence. Instead of I am not enough, whatever you want to put in there, I choose I am becoming. So here you're reframing it. What are you becoming? What action will you take next? That's your neuroshift. So finally, remember, it's pause, pivot, reset, rewire, repeat. Because sometimes the moment that changes your life isn't a year away. It's your next 3 seconds. So, with that happy thought, do you have any questions, Peter, or what belief, did you inherit that you? Let me throw a few questions out yet. Let me ask you this: what belief did you inherit that you're not ready to return? What did someone tell you about yourself that you no longer believe? What is an identity you've outgrown? I see people hanging around with the same friends they had 30 years ago, which isn't bad. I have friends from 60, 70 years ago. But you may have outgrown them. Is it time for a shift there? I know that a lot of times if people quit drinking, but they still hang out with the friends they got drunk with, it's easy to fall back into that pattern. What would change if you stopped saying, that's just who I am? It's a stupid defense. What is one 3-second decision you can make differently today to become that to which you aspire? So here are the 3 big takeaways. Beliefs are not always facts. They are interpretations your brain has learned. Identity can become a cage. But you can open the door. And the micro moments create macro change. You don't have to reinvent your entire life in one afternoon. You can begin with the next 3 seconds. And, I'm going to go back to Torrey. Yeah, he made a decision in just 3 seconds. And it's not only changed him, he's lost his life. But there are hundreds of people at the celebration of life that have been affected. There's a ripple effect to every 3-second decision we make. So I hope everyone kind of reflects on some of the questions I've asked today. And again, with the book, there is a workbook that if you really want to transform, if you really want to change, it allows you to dig a little bit deeper. So with that happy moment, I'm wishing you all that your next micro moment is your best decision.
Well, this is perfect.
So, Peter,
thanks for
back to you.
Another great radio show. Thanks for another great radio show. So for those people that are listening in, if you go to Edie-raether.com, you'll be able to hear this as far as the end, as well as the previous radio shows on the radio show link. Most importantly, buy the book. So you buy the 3-second Neuroshift, apply the principles. There's a workbook that comes with that as well. If you want save some money, buy a bundle of 10 and share it with other people as well. If you have a family member you think would benefit, or if you have employees or your employer, who knows? I mean, these are the things that really make a very big difference. And Edie, it's always very thought-provoking. You make my brain itch when you go through the different things that you go through. So I never come out of this radio show the same as when I started. So that's a good thing.
Oh, that is. That's a wonderful compliment. I appreciate that. And hopefully it does the same for all those that have joined us. Yep.
That's it. Yeah, so as we go through this journey, this personal journey where you've applied this in your own personal life more so, recently than ever before because of your son's sudden passing and all the other things that have happened, I know that you've kept yourself together as best as anybody I could ever imagine as a result of the training that you're applying from this book. So thanks for everybody for being here. We're going to catch everybody next time. And Edie, do you have any thoughts on what we're going to cover maybe next week? Or we're going to continue with this? I could stay on this forever. Just so you know, I could stay right here forever.
I'm going to scratch my brain because we might. What I might focus on next week is more the power of identity. Because that is, if your identity is, everybody in my family is overweight, if my identity is, I grew up in poverty, how we defend it. I think we could just focus, we can go now from beliefs. So let's focus really deep into identity.
Excellent. Okay, good. Well, we'll catch everybody next time on the Edie-raether Radio Show.
Thanks for tuning in. You've just finished listening to the Edie-raether Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network. We hope today's program challenged the way you think, gave you practical ideas you can use, and inspired you to create positive change in your work and life. Edie-raether has spent more than 5 decades helping people and organizations rewire old patterns, unlock greater potential, and turn insight into action. As a keynote speaker, best-selling author, behavioral strategist, and creator of Neuroshift, Edie is changing the way the world thinks, one mind at a time. Visit Edie-raether.com. That's EDIERAETHER.com to explore her books, speaking programs, training resources, and her newest book, The 3-Second Neuroshift. On behalf of Edie-raether, Peter Mingils, and everyone at Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network, thank you for listening. You can hear the Edie-raether Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio, Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other major podcast platforms. Until next time, remember, change your thinking, change your choices, and change your world.